you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we are going to go through everything you need to know in order to create your own vampire in Kindred of the East, or Kuei-Jin, to use their proper title. Before we properly sink our teeth into tonight's episode, I wish to tell you what you will need in order to follow along with me to make your first Kuei-Jin in Kindred of the East. First and foremost, you will need a copy of the Kindred of the East sourcebook, either as a physical or a PDF copy if you are a weirdo or allergic to books or something. If you are playing the game old school with the archaic devices known as pen and paper, you may have a friend or two who is willing to lend you their copy, but as more and more Shen are seeking the likes of Discord and Roll20 to play, it is highly unlikely someone will just lend you their book from afar. I am also going to recommend you purchase the Kindred of the East Companion Guide, as not only does it contain additional Kuei-Jin types to play, but also comes with advanced Kuei-Jin disciplines. But for the sake of simplicity, I will mostly be using the varieties found in the main Kindred of the East sourcebook. The easiest place to buy a physical or digital copy of Kindred of the East and any other supplement books is by going to drivethrurpg.com. Whilst I could presume that you know plenty about Kindred of the East, I think it is fair to assume that the vast majority of people who have heard of the Kuei-Jin have played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which led you here to see how the Kindred of the East game was different from Vampire the Masquerade. There are no Kuei-Jin clans. Instead, they follow their own path of enlightenments to achieve Golconda, which are called Dharmas. There are 5 available in the main sourcebook, which I'll briefly summarise for you. The Howl of the Devil Tigers believe that they are replacements for the incompetent demons of ages past. They punish sinners and seek enlightenment through pain and violence. The Sons of the Shadow, also known as Bone Flowers, are coldly logical necromancers who seek dispassionate reasoning and enforcement of dharmic balance. They are also tightly tied to mortal society through their descendants, and often assist their families even centuries after their deaths. The Way of the Resplendent Crane is a highly legalistic collection of schools dedicated to reversing the Wheel of Ages and restoring virtue. The often misunderstood Thrashing Dragon Dharma recognizes that they are dead, but seeks to achieve enlightenment by imitating and interacting with the living, even they seem to eat and screw their way through unlife. Finally, there is the Thousand Whispers, who live a sequence of masks, new identities they construct after death in order to understand mortal life and hopefully transcend it. If you are already overwhelmed by the heavy differences between the Kuei-Jin and Vampire the Masquerade, I suggest you listen to my podcast episodes regarding the Kuei-Jin before proceeding any further. And once you have any sourcebook and any other books you want, you'll need a character sheet. DriveThruRPG doesn't easily provide PDF copies, so you'll have to look elsewhere to find an interactive PDF character sheet. It should be noted that Kindred of the East has its own unique character sheet based on Vampire the Masquerade 2nd Edition's character sheet. The Kindred of the East sourcebook references Vampire the Masquerade 2nd Edition when it comes to character creation, presuming the players who purchase the Kindred of the East sourcebook also have Vampire the Masquerade 2nd Edition, a version of Vampire the Masquerade I do not own at the time of recording. If you own a copy of Vampire the Masquerade 2nd Edition, either as a PDF or physical version, you are set to go. If not, I highly recommend you do what I intend to be doing for this character creation guide, which is use a special mrgon.rocksolidshells.com interactive sheet that incorporates Kindred of the East and Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, or V20, to use the shorthand. Other formats and styles are probably available if you wish to make life difficult for yourself. And with that preparation shenanigans biting the dust, one can now begin to create their Kindred of the East character. There is no system or dice roll to be made when determining your character's dharma and concepts, unless you really want to. You can choose whichever dharma to pursue in your story. Like Vampire the Masquerade, Kindred of the East is part of White Wolf's publishing World of Darkness universe. As such, Kindred of the East adopts the storyteller system, which encourages players to become one with their character, to embrace them, as it were. But Kuei-Jin are not embraced like the Kindred are, but are essentially reborn through a process known as the Second Breath. Where the soul enters the Yomi world, their term for the abyss is split in two parts: the Hun, the rational and dutiful side, and the Po, the monstrous demonic side of the soul. In order to return to the world as a Kuei-Jin, the mortal must have been in 2 of 3 scenarios. 1. The mortal has awakened to the darker part of their soul during their lifetime, the Po. Such an event is usually triggered by constantly performing evil doings throughout the course of your life. 2. The mortal candidate has died in such a traumatic manner that the Po awaken at a moment of death, a circumstance only available if the dying kind has an overwhelming desire to live, which is not necessarily the same as wanting to die. We all fear death in one way or another, while some just accept that they are destined to die. In either scenario, the mortal must have a great strength of will. With this small amount of Kuei-Jin lore in mind, there are some questions you need to ask yourself with regards to your character's life as a mortal. What sort of person were they in life? How did they die? What did they do? How do they go about doing it? What is their purpose in an life now, and how do they go about doing it? These are just some of the questions that should come to mind when building your character, as this is their life as human that will determine the stats and concepts. Starting at the top of the page, you should be able to fill at least 2 of these by yourself. Name is obviously your character's name, be it their actual name or pseudonym. Player is obviously your name. The Chronicle is the name of the story that you are playing, such as, I don't know, China by Night, Japan by Night, Follow the Law by Night Instagram page by night. Those who are familiar with Vampire the Masquerade should be able to proceed with Nature and Demeanor with little assistance. For those who aren't so sure as to what to do at this point, Nature and Demeanor are very similar in definition but are very different in how one would use them, for they define your character and how they interact with the world. Demeanor is how you choose to present your character to the world, whilst nature is what they truly are. Someone who appears to be overly joyous and bubbly to be around may be in fact incredibly angry and is just putting on a good show. Both nature and demeanor splinter off into many different archetypes, each one providing different ways for players to regain willpower, a finite resource a player may use in a tricky situation, or to resist entering frenzy, given the right circumstances. There are lots to choose from, so I'll let you discover these for yourself. Whilst not listed at the top of the page, now would be a good point to decide your Dharma, for they will begin to influence the final 4 boxes to fill out. Balance refers to how the Kuei-Jin conflict their beast. They developed a more intimate relationship with their primal souls after centuries of self-reflection and understanding, which in some sense is similar to the kindred understanding of the various paths of enlightenment. They don't, however, use the same concept that kindred adopt. They have 4 virtues that come in pairs. The first 2 are the opposing chi virtues, yin and yang. Yin, the black masculine half, measured the Kuei-Jin's sensitivity to negative energies, whilst the feminine white yang measures their positive energies. Then there is the soul virtues Hun and Po, which is a representation of the 2 parts of their soul. The Hun is said to be the higher rational soul, while the Po is the lower demonic soul. The difference between these 4 shows how pronounced your characters are, whether they are monstrous and emotionless, or humane and optimistic. The direction box traditionally corresponds to the balance of yin and yang, in addition to serving a purpose in Kuei-Jin society. The directions are north, west, center, south, and east. North interprets the laws and preserves the traditions, west bears messages and punishments from spirits, center guides oneself and others toward enlightenment, the south has the duty to create, lead and destroy, whilst the east watches over the floating world of mortals. Next is the Po nature. Remember that the Po is a more demonic soul and will want to attempt to control you once certain conditions are met. This is not the same as frenzy. Whilst Kuei-Jin can frenzy as a Cainite can, the Po forces the player to roleplay their character in a certain way, at the character's annoyance. 8 archetypes are available in the Kindred of the East sourcebook, but you can seek various editions of Wraith the Oblivion for more. The Bandit makes your Po a ravaging monster. The Barbarian may force you to see and agree with the philosophy of the Kuei-Jin, the Kindred of the West, Cainites or Kindred, whatever you want to call them. The Deceiver undermines your Hun with deceit and trickery. The Demon is a more horrific version of the Bandit who only wants to destroy. The Fool distracts you from what you're supposed to be doing in order to save you from difficult complications. The Legalist is the inverse of this and demands rigid obedience and punishments to match. The Monkey cares not for your quest for harmony, diverting all the Kuei-Jin's attention and energy to something they much rather be doing. Finally, there is the Slave. This breed of Pole does not trust your character's judgment and wants to force your knee to every form of authority it can. And just to reiterate, if these archetypes do not fit your character concept, refer to any edition of Wraith of the Oblivion for further guidance. This is an awful lot of information to process all at once, believe me, I know your pain, so the emphasis of an example character has never been more important. So to add all of this information to my example character, as a mortal, Mishiro Yusai was an aspiring artist, a painter who tried to capture the world around her with a melancholic reflection of life. Mishiro was a very shy girl who sought some comfort and joy from video games, anime and online forums when she wasn't painting. Things would not go plain sailing for her, however, as her paintings went underappreciated and she was forever being bullied for being a moody introvert and otaku. In addition, she was shunned by her family for not taking up a proper subject to study, all of which took its toll on her mind and confidence from those in the outside world. All of this, combined with the lack of contact with the outside world, would lead her down a particularly nasty road to depression and anxiety. Unable to cope anymore, she tried to kill herself by throwing herself in the river in the woodlands in her village. I say try, for she came back to life and devoured the ones who found her body, her mother and father. Far more cold and emotionless than she ever was as a human, the amnesia-struck Kuei-Jin, Mashuri Yusai now follows the son of the Shadow Dharma, meaning her virtue is yin, which means she would focus more on negative energies. This means that she is weak to wood and the element that represents yang. Unlike other Kuei-Jin, she can enter torpor when she's staked in the heart with wooden stakes. Her direction is west, which encourages her to deal with spirits. The Son of Shadow surrounds themselves with the colour black, Asian theatre masks, cool springs of water, metal, the number 4, amongst other things, which would be incorporated into appearance, haven, and how I would portray the character. With regards to nature and demeanors that I'm pulling straight from V20, for I do not own Vampire the Masquerade 2nd edition, nature and demeanor would marry up with the direction of the West being cold and emotionless, but also her insecurities. I cannot see her being the sort of lonely individual to easily take on the mantle of a leader often, much preferring to be the follower. For that reason, I shall assign her the demeanor of conformist, which grants Mishiro a willpower point whenever the group or leader achieve a goal due to her help. Her nature is loner, which I feel was fairly obvious. When she does something by herself that somehow benefits the Wu, which is the Kindred of the East term for coterie, she then gets a willpower point returned to her. Finally, there is her Po nature, which could easily be the fool or the monkey, as both try and divert Mishiro from taking on important things. I feel that the monkey would be more fitting, as I could see it forcing Mishiro back to her haven to play video games or do some painting. Now that you have established some lore regarding your character, you should have an idea of what sort of person they are when you assign points into your attributes. How do they solve their problems? Fighting, thinking, or talking? How do they naturally interact with the world? The attribute section is made up of 3 categories: physical, mental, and social. You start by assigning 1 point in all attributes, and you then distribute 7 in a primary attribute, 5 to a secondary attribute, and 3 dots to a tertiary group. If you decide to put 4 points in a particular attribute, you can choose to assign a specialty to it. Mishiro in my mind is not very strong, but does have a good eye for detail, what with being a painter and all. I would also argue she also has good wits about her, as she is used to being bullied and know what to look out for when shit hits the fan right in her mouth. She is not terribly great at socializing, but can easily cope with a digital interface right in front of her. By my reckoning, mental is the primary group, social the secondary group, and tertiary belongs to physical. For the physical attributes, I've put 1 point in strength, 3 points in dexterity, and 2 points in stamina. In the social attributes, she has 2 points in charisma, 2 points in manipulation, and 3 points in appearance. And in the mental attribute, she has 4 points in perception, 3 points in intelligence, and 3 points in wits. Dice rolls in VTM are usually made up of 1 attribute plus a skill, as there are many ways of demonstrating feats of strength and intelligence, unless you are wanting to deadlift a yak, for example, as that would be pure strength by my reckoning. And Kindred of the East is no different. The skills are divided up into 3 sections. From left to right, you have talents, skills, and knowledges. Similarly to attributes, abilities are prioritized in primary, secondary, and tertiary groups, with no skill getting more than 3 points at this stage. No skill must get 3 points at this stage. The primary group gets 13 points, secondary gets 9 points, and the tertiary group gets 5 points. If you are using the Mr. Gone V20 version like I am, and thus following V20 rules, any points in crafts, performance or technology have to be assigned a specialty, which would add 1 dice to any roll where said specialty would apply. For example, if your character was an iPad expert and was attempting to repair their contact's iPad, you would gain an additional die when repairing it. Whether this rule regarding specialty points is found in previous versions of Vampire the Masquerade is not known to me, so sue me for not knowing everything. If you are using the original Kindred of the East character sheet, you will notice some unique abilities that I'll expand upon briefly for you. Acrobatics is derived from either martial arts or your mortal days as a gymnast. On a mechanical level, it combines skill and dexterity, allowing your character to perform wild moves. For each dot you have in acrobatics, you ignore 1 health point of falling damage. Martial arts can be used to replace brawl, and allows the character access to a variety of hard and soft styles of fighting and throwing, each one with their own system, further explained in the source book. Meditation puts you into a moment of pure zen, allowing one to find their inner peace, following a dance, chant, etc. In gameplay terms, it allows the character to unlock puzzles by lowering the difficulty of intelligence rolls, to go without feeding for as many nights as you have successes, and more. Portents revolve around omen practices. Torture is fairly straightforward in premise, but has different gameplay mechanics than what you would immediately expect. I will let you discover those for yourself. Enigmas is another puzzle-solving trait, but revolves around riddles and illusions. Rituals demonstrates your understanding and performing of rituals, which has its own system I won't be exploring with you in this character creation guide. It is a required stat if you are wanting to add rites to your character sheet, but if you're using the adapted V20 sheet that I am using, you could very easily replace this with a cult. The distribution of Mishiro's points and abilities will reflect her abilities as a painter and computer knowledge, and perhaps some understanding in combat, as she may well have had to physically protect herself from bullies. It should consider her understanding the occult, as she follows the Son of the Shadow Dharma path, a path that encourages necromantic practices. In the talents abilities, I have put 2 points in alertness, 1 point in awareness, 1 point in brawl, 2 points in empathy, 1 point in expression, and 2 points in streetwise. In the skills abilities, I have put 1 point in drive, 1 point in etiquette, 1 point in melee, and 2 points in stealth. And in the knowledges abilities, I have put 3 points in academics, 3 points in computers, 2 points in investigation, 3 points in technology, which I'm having phones as the specialty ability, and 2 points in occult, which I'm pretending is rituals for the reasons I have already mentioned. Alternatively, you could use rituals as an occult specialty, if your storyteller approves of it, of course. Next is the advantages section, which is where your Kuei-Jin becomes more unique. On the left pane is the disciplines, your blood-based mythical powers. Each character begins with 3 dots to spend on your disciplines to distribute how you please. You could put 1 point in all 3, 2 points in one and 1 in the other, or dump all 3 in one discipline. It is entirely up to you. The Kuei-Jin are free to use whatever disciplines they like, for they are not limited by the Dharma path they follow. The one catch with this is that one discipline must be a demon art, which is the one dictated by the pole. With Mishiro's disciplines, I have decided to go for the 1 point in the 3 disciplines approach. The demon art I have chosen is Black Wind, which is essentially Kuei-Jin's celerity. I have also chosen Ghost Flame Shintai, which, according to the book, the fire element analog allows its practitioners to evoke the Shadow Time Flame, raw chi energy from the spirit worlds. This energy manifests as an unearthly fire, which radiates from a vampire's eyes, mouth, hands, or entire body. There are 2 types of Ghost Flame, the Scorching Yang Flame and the Icy Yin Flame. Yang Flame burns a bright red, purple or other bright shades, whilst the Yin Flame burns black, white, icy blue and other lunar hues. The final discipline I have chosen is Tapestry, which allows the user to manipulate dragon lines more directly. Through the practice of Tapestry, vampires attune themselves to yin and yang forces in the wind, water and soil, then manipulates those forces for a variety of effects. After this, we move on to backgrounds, for which you have 5 points to spend. These should support the character concepts. A havenless Kuei-Jin is unlikely to have lots of cash, for example. Kindred of the East has a massive 4 backgrounds to choose from, which can provide interesting twists to your chronicles, such as having your own spirit guides called a Nushi, owning a magical artifact, or knowing special rituals known as rites. You can spend points in the established VTM backgrounds too, of course, it is highly recommended, but the two backgrounds you cannot purchase are Generation, for Kuei-Jin have no Generation, and no one can purchase Status. The backgrounds I have purchased are Domain, Allies, Contacts and Rights. Each one has 1 point, and annoyingly, the right also counts the background point, so I can only purchase a level 1 right. That, and I only have 2 in Occult/Rituals, so I wouldn't be able to purchase the level 3 and 4 right even if I wanted to anyway. And the right I have purchased is the Harmonious Shielding of the Guarded Home, which is a level 1 right. This right protects the violation or invasion of a Kuei-Jin's resting place or the tomb that contained her mortal body. Now we assign your virtues, which is where the Kindred of the East character creation process begins to lose the fucking plot and become really confusing. These are the Hun and Po pairs and the Yin and Yang pairs discussed earlier. Refer to your Dharma type and direction for guidance as to which one should get more points or whether they should be balanced as possible. The Yin and Yang virtues are your Qi virtues. You give them both 1 point before giving 4 more points to either one as you see fit. The dots are the permanent ratings, which measures the character's personal leaning towards positive or negative energies and the control they have over them, whilst the squares show how much of it you spend during each session, which you can get back. However you choose to assign your points is also the number of Yin and Yang points you have at the beginning of the session. Mishiro follows the Son of the Shadow Dharma, and her direction is west, so she would have more Yin than Yang, especially as she is someone with a negative outlook on the world and is incredibly depressed and rejected much of her mortal life. I have given her 4 Yin points and 2 Yang points. The Hun and Po virtues are your soul virtues. Hun being the more humane soul, whilst Po represents the demonic side. You give 1 point to Hun and 3 points to Po. Your beginning willpower is the same as your Hun score, so your starting willpower is 1, all of which can be increased with freebie points later on. Your willpower has to be increased to at least 5, which means using 4 of your 15 points at a bare minimum on your Hun or willpower score, for increasing your Hun also increases your willpower. And for every point you have in Po, you have the same in Demon Chi, which means at this point in the character creation guide, you should have 3 Demon Chi points. These can be used in similar fashions that Celerity and Potence would be in versions of Vampire the Masquerade before and after Kindred of the East. You could spend no more points in Demon Chi in one turn than the points you have in Stamina. So, if you have 3 points in Demon Chi but 2 Stamina, you can only use 2 of those Demon Chi points. Once used, they would return once awakening the following night. Your different virtues are used instead of Vampire the Masquerade's blood points and hunger systems, in addition to having cool powers of their own. One final thing you should know regarding spending points on virtues is that the total score of the added Chi virtues cannot exceed 10. For example, if your Yang score is 6, the Yin score cannot exceed 4, which shows the feeling alignment of the Kuei-Jin being more negative than positive. Similarly, a Kuei-Jin with more points in Po than Hun is more monstrous in nature. Your alignment is considered balanced if they are either the same or there is a difference of 1 between them. Now, set your Dharma rating to 1. You personally cannot increase the Dharma rating with freebie points, but it is something that is earned with roleplay. We have almost finished creating your first Kuei-Jin. Huzzah! The last thing that needs to be done is to spend your 15 freebie points on whatever you want, excluding willpower, which has to be at least 5 by increasing your Hun, which also increases your willpower, or spending points on the willpower but doesn't increase the Hun score. And remember, you can't increase your Dharma either with freebie points. There are some other things to keep in mind when spending your freebie points on your Kuei-Jin. An attribute costs 5 points, abilities cost 2 points, with the exception of martial arts, which costs 3. To increase or give yourself a new discipline, you must spend 10 points. Increasing your Hun and Qi virtues, your Yin and Yang costs 3 points. Remember, increasing your Hun also increases your willpower. That being said, increasing your backgrounds, Po, and willpower costs 1 point. Spending points on willpower does not affect the Hun, but spending points on your Hun does affect your willpower. If you're going to learn anything from this creation guide, I hope it's that. These numbers change when you gain experience points throughout your chronicle and go to beef up your character. To increase the attribute, it is 4 times the current rating. To increase an ability, it is the current rating times 2. Unless that ability is martial arts, then it is the current rating times 3. To increase the discipline level, it is the current rating times 8. All disciplines cost the same to advance in Kindred of the East, so the cost expenditure is the same for purchasing a new discipline. However, there must be a reason as to how the Kuei-Jin learned this new discipline, i.e. it was taught by blah. To increase your yin, yang or hun virtues, it is the current rating times 3. Unless it is imbalanced towards the virtue, then it is times 2 the current rating. To increase your Po virtue or willpower ratings, it equals the current rating. So if you want to take your Po to level 3 and currently have 2 Po points, you can spend 2 experience points to increase it. Doing so also increases your demon chi. There is also the option of buying merits and flaws that make your character all the more unique, each one being physical, mental, social or supernatural. Merits grant you special advantages that make you stand out from the rest of the Kuei-Jin and the Chronicle, and the Kindred too. Flaws are the exact opposite and worth adding to the character sheet. After all, no one is perfect. Each merit has its own point cost expenditure, and flaw adds a certain number of freebie points you can spend. You can purchase as many merits as you can afford, but you can't have more than 7 points of flaws. There are some merits and flaws that are unique to the Kuei-Jin, only found in the Kindred of the East sourcebook, whilst there are merits and flaws that Kuei-Jin cannot purchase, which are Berserker, Dual Nature, Eat Food, for the Kuei-Jin can already eat food and drinks, True Faith, Light Sensitive, All Kindred Ties, Babyface, as some Kuei-Jin disciplines allow them to have similar powers whilst others forgo this, Misplaced Heart, Efficient Digestion, Selective Digestion, and Thin-Blooded. As I do not have a copy of Vampire the Masquerade 2nd edition, the version that Kindred of the East relies heavily upon, I shall refer to V20 again when choosing merits and flaws. For Miss Shuru's merits, I have given Coldly Logical, Concentration and Eidetic Memory. Her flaws are Amnesia, Beacon of the Unholy, and Eerie Presence. And with the remaining freebie points, to which I have 17, I shall give her 5 willpower points, 2 Po and Hun points, 2 resources, and 2 intimidation points, which I believe, if I've done my math correctly, has completely expelled all of her freebie points. Once you have finished adding freebie points, you can finally say that you have made your first Kindred of the East character, your very first Kuei-Jin. Yes, the book has all that you need to understand the character creation process, but I have found it sometimes helps you to have someone walk you through the process, rather than nag your storyteller 100 times. And as I seem to be the only one to have created a Kindred of the East character creation guide online at this time of recording, you can come and nag me instead, but be gentle, I bruise easily. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.